Busted flat in Baton Rouge, waiting for a train, feeling nearly faded as my jeans. Bobby thumbed a diesel down just before it rained, rode us all the way to New Orleans. I pulled my harpoon out of my dirty red bandana and blowed it soft while Bobby sang the blues. With the windshield wiper slapping time and holding Bobby's hand in mine. We sang every song that driver knew. Freedom, just another word for to lose. Nothing ain't worth nothing if it ain't free. Feeling good was easy, Lord, when Bobby sang the blues. Feeling good was good enough for me. Good enough for me and Bobby McGee. La-da-da-da-da-da-da. La-da-da-da, Bobby McGee. La-da-da-da-da-da-da. From the Kentucky coal mine to the California sun, hey, Bobby shared the secrets of my soul. Through all kinds of weather, everything we done, Bobby, baby, kept me from the cold. Somewhere near Selena, Lord, I let her slip away. She's looking for a home I hope she finds. Well, I'd trade all my tomorrows for a bit of yesterday, holding Bobby's body next to mine. Freedom, just another word for nothing ain't worth nothing if it ain't free. Feeling good was easy, Lord, when Bobby sang the blues. Sing it like you're drunk. Good enough for me and Bobby. Yeah, come on, give yourself a hand. You did good. I noticed there was about 5 of you that weren't singing during the worship. I thought I'd give you a shot, just give you a couple of cowboy hats in the audience, and I was going to come out and sing, New York, New York for my friend Patrick back there, but, I ain't wired like that. It just... So this old man and this old woman, they've been married a long time, and he did really good as long as they were together. But if he wasn't right with her, he'd forget what he was doing. He'd always forget something. Well, it came time for him to apply for his Social Security. So he went down to the Social Security office, but his wife couldn't go, so he was down there trying to get it all together. He was there about 2 hours before he even got his paperwork. Finally, he got his paperwork, and he worked on it, and he worked on it. It was hours and hours had passed, and finally, it was almost all day he'd been there, and it was his turn. He got up to the window, and the lady was reviewing his paperwork, and everything was in order. She said, it all looks good. All we need now is just your ID to prove you're old enough for Social Security, and we'll be done. And he reached for his wallet, and he didn't have his. He said, I don't have my ID. Oh, he was like just sick. He said, oh no, because if he didn't get it then, he had to come back, start all over. And so he said, I don't have my ID. The lady felt sorry for him. She said, I'll tell you what, just unbutton a couple buttons on your shirt. He said, huh? And she said, yeah. She said, and he unbuttoned a couple buttons. He had all this gray hair there, She said, anybody's got gray hair on their chest is old enough for Social Security. He thought, boy, this is a great deal. She signed the paperwork and sent him on his way. Well, he got home and he explained to his wife how this all went down. He'd been there all day. He didn't want to start over again. He didn't have his ID. She said to unbutton my shirt, and I showed her some gray hair on my chest, and she said I was old enough, and she approved it. His wife said, you fool, you should have dropped your pants. You could have got disability too. That ain't right. Come on, man. How many people on Social Security in the office, in the house? There's only one who'll admit it now after that story. I'm looking at it. Well, we knew that, but mental health is mental health, all I can tell you. So I usually come and I have like a profound, honed message that I can bring, and I can do that without any notes. And I had something else I was going to sing and something I was going to do, but I was out here in the parking lot, and the Lord kind of drew me up short. Now, I've been teaching. I think I've taught 4 or 5 times this week. Saturday, I was up on the other coast teaching to a bunch of ministers and people that are getting ready to be ordained. And I had that message. I said, I pulled that one out of my hat. I've been teaching on Tuesday or Wednesday night up in Riverview. I said, I could pull something from up there. Thursday night at the front. I grabbed that, and I speak multiple times every week. But the Lord said, no, we ain't doing that. And I said, you're going to make me walk up there and not know what I'm going to talk about. So what happens if I can't think of anything to say? And the Lord just laughed. He just thought that was funny. So I want to talk tonight. I'm just going to talk to you. Is that all right? Say all right. Say that's all right. That's all right. I want to talk tonight about strength-based recovery. This is not actually a lesson, although I've got some notes. I want to talk about strength-based recovery because we have operated kind of in the other spectrum. This is common sense sobriety. How many need a little common sense sobriety? You all sure enough do. What happens, I call it sobriety preservation, where we've been working all these years on relapse prevention, and we get complicated, we dig into these steps, and we need something sometimes that's just clean, something that's uncomplicated. Sobriety. See, there's a place that we have to eliminate the mental gymnastics. We need to embrace simple conclusions that keep us sober and keep us moving into the joy of real life. Man, I am totally opposed to any form of recovery that requires you remain perpetually miserable. I don't listen to the guy that's got 22 years sober and his great claim to fame, he's got all the character defects he started with. I have to say, well, why didn't you do the steps? Or just took step number 6 and prayed about it. I mean, you could get better than that. And what we do is we enter into sobriety, and see, life's often complicated. How many notice that? Sometimes it's complicated, and now it's more complicated. It doesn't matter what you do, it gets more and more complicated. I went down to the store and bought myself an iPad 6th generation. Holy Toledo. I didn't think I'd ever seen a computer before. By the time the guy got done talking to me, I wanted to turn it back in. I will tell you, one of the neat features it's got is a split screen. I can do 2 lessons at one time. I got them both open tonight, still don't know what I'm going to talk about. So life is complicated. The fact that we add to that, addictive people are complicated. You're complicated. Look at the person next to you and say, he's talking about you. Are you listening or not? You're complicated. You're complicated all by yourself without any outside influences. Consequently, your choices are very questionable. Sometimes they're quite self-centered. How many notice that? Yeah. And at times, your choices are downright ridiculous. That all adds to the confusion. That being said, we form recovery circles around complications. We do that even here in Celebrate Recovery. It gets complicated. I had somebody want me to start a Celebrate Recovery program. I got the manual on the Celebrate Recovery. It was like 1,200 pages. I said, I got a book called Principle Approach. Let's use that. So, we abandoned the other. So what happens is we have these complicated people making complicated, confusing decisions. And then we tend to bring that into recovery. And a lot of the old timers, 8, 10, 12, 15, 30 years, 50 years, a lot of them, and this is not just now, this has always been, are not looking for truth. They're looking for control. They will sacrifice a good piece of truth so they can control your sobriety. They want to control the meetings. Bill Wilson spotted it. He called them the self-appointed messiahs of AA. Have you met any of these guys? Yeah, some of them even have halos they wear. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Recovery is found in the simple wisdom of how someone else found a repose from addiction. Sometimes a seemingly insignificant one-liner or a slogan often makes all the difference in the world. So let's explore some simple paths that the average reasonable person looking from the outside would say, yeah, that makes sense. Albert Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. Taking a straightforward entry into the solution and the successes that other people have had in solutions. I've had a lot of successes in solutions. I turned my 38th AA anniversary since I was here. It was last weekend, I think. I had 38 years. In 38 years, I've heard almost everything. And what I haven't heard, I've said. Not all of it makes sense. One of my favorite things to say at the recovery meetings these days when I go to AA or NA or wherever is I say, I happen to not agree with everything that was said here. As a matter of fact, there's only a couple things that I thought were good. Man, that really ticks them off. That's why I've been looking for a new home group. They don't like that much, you know. So what we have is we have people that want to figure out how they became an addict. I got into an argument in my home group the other day because they said everybody's born an addict. I mean, it became, if one person says it, somebody else agrees with it, then everybody in the room. If somebody says, I don't believe in God, then the next person goes, well, I didn't really believe in God. And then pretty soon they're bashing the church, and I have to tell them to shut up. I did that the other day in the meeting. I told a lady to shut up right in front of God and everybody. Well, she introduced the topic. She'd only been sober like 12 minutes. Okay, well, this is good. She introduced the topic. It took her 15 minutes. I didn't come to listen to her prattle on. It was nonsense. And so then I had to speak immediately after. Because her problem was she kept going to the bars and the nightclubs with the people that are drinking, and she wants to drink. I wanted to take up a collection to give her enough money for a fifth of Jack and get her started, just to get her to be quiet. Well, she did all that. I finally said, 100% of all the people that have ever relapsed were in the same room where the alcohol is. If you don't want the devil's, the fruit of the sin, stay out of the devil's orchard. She didn't like that, neither did the atheist, but I didn't really care. And so the meeting went on, and some people said some stupid things, and whatever they were talking about, I wasn't really sure. And then she raised her hand. Nobody else was raising their hand. 10 minutes into it, she'd spent 15 minutes. Now we're almost to halftime. She's going to double dip because she's so brilliant. And so she started back in. She wasn't effing giving up none of her friends. And I stood up and said, "Oh, shut up." And I walked out of the meeting. A whole bunch of people got up and followed me out. I think it was the best ending we've ever had at that meeting. It was just great. They did let me back in the next night, but they had to vote on it, group conscience, to see if I could come back. So people think they were born addicts. I don't think that. I don't think people are born addicts. I think you might have a propensity. You might have an indicator that way. But I know a lot of people, they're the only addict in their family. How many of you are the black sheep of the family? Let me see the black sheep. And then you came to AA and you joined the herd. I mean, it's the whole thing. We're all black sheep. The black sheep of the family. I was a black sheep. I'm the only alcoholic in my group, the only addict. Well, we're born addicts. Well, I don't think so. Maybe you were, but I earned it. Man, I drank a lot. I put in a lot of time and effort to get that title. Don't take that away from me. So simply said this, set down how you became addicted. It don't matter. Why you got hooked, and simply accept the fact that you did. That's called simple sobriety. This idea, let's make it complicated. Let's make it big. E.F. Schumacher wrote a book called Small is Beautiful. He said, any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex, but it takes a touch of genius and lots of courage to move in the opposite direction. Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So how do we change? We don't have to figure out how we became addicts. If you're convinced you're an addict, or you're convinced you're an alcoholic, you're convinced you have an addiction, then change. Hello, are you all listening to me or not? There's a change that's got to come. For me, I removed alcohol and drugs from me, and I put it over there. And it's no longer part of the question, and it's no longer part of the answer, and it's no longer part of my life. Have you done that yet? Is that too complicated? Just take it out of your life. It's no longer part of the deal. It's kind of like the red tide is not part of the people that live in Kansas. They're just separated from it. They don't care nothing about no red tide. I don't care nothing about no drink or no pot or none of the rest of it. I don't need it. I'm not going back to it. I'm going to be sober the rest of my life. Say, how do you know? Well, I'm sober now, and I've been saying that for 38 years. I think I'm going to stay sober. Because I mean, the bigger than life, see, I don't want to miss this death thing. When it comes time for me to leave, I want to know what's going on. Because there's two directions. I want to make sure I get on the right path when I leave. You ought to be sober when you die. I mean, just for that sake. What if you died in a blackout? You won't come out of a blackout and you're dead. You wouldn't know what was going on. Where am I at? Well, you should have stayed sober, but you're in purgatory. That's where you are. That's what purgatory's for. People that die in a blackout, they go to purgatory until they can remember what they did. They have to explain why they drank, and then they can get out of purgatory. Well, I want to be wide awake for that. I don't want to be in a blackout when I die. I'm ready to step off. I got to tell, maybe you don't believe this way. You don't have to. This part I'm just going to add on, and if you don't believe it, that's okay. But when I leave, I'm going out with a shout. When I leave, I'm going to step out of this planet, out of this earth suit, and I'm going to step into the presence of the living God, and I don't care what anybody else says. Ask me, how do you know that for sure? Because I already went there one time. I got translated out of this body, and I got sent to a place that I've wanted to go back ever since. I'm not suicidal, mind you, but it was such a remarkable trip, I just couldn't hardly believe it. When I got there, I saw millions of people, and I didn't know any of them, but I knew everything about all of them. It was like a total stranger, and that was part of my family. It was amazing. I heard songs that I never heard, but I knew them completely. Oh, you didn't think about all that. And we went there, and I remember going there, but I don't remember turning around. Next thing, we were on our way back. That's another whole subject. Let me talk to you about sobriety. Come on. I think you ought to stay sober. I think you ought to change. Pain never produces change. Say, really? Come on, say, really? Really? No, it doesn't. Do you know anybody tonight that's in pain? Huh? Do you know anybody that's in pain? If they change, do you think it would help their pain? I know a guy right now. I spent some time with him this afternoon. His girlfriend went back out and is shooting heroin. He is in his second year of sobriety. He's just trying to survive. And she comes and goes and comes and goes and comes and goes. I finally asked him this afternoon, I said, how often does something need to happen to you before something occurs to you? If you're going to be dumb, you better be tough. He's acting pretty dumb as far as pain has not changed him at all. Pain didn't really change you. Pain is not the catalyst for change. It only produces a desire to change when you get done with the pain. Knowledge produces change, but not without action. Time does not produce change. There are old alcoholics and young people in sobriety. There are old drunks and sober young people. I know time doesn't matter. Time doesn't change anything. Need does not produce change. There are 20-year-old millionaires and 75-year-old people without a dime. Oh, it's not about need, because if it was about need, they'd have changed a long time ago. So there comes a place where we talk about sobriety preservation or strength-based recovery. Our other model that we've been operating in is called the vulnerability model. It's focused on our processing and identifying our weaknesses. It's the way up from the bottom, up out of the pit, I'll give you that. We've dug a bad hole for our life, and so it's a good place to start. But is that all there is? Having worked the steps and completed the processes, we see nowhere else to take personal growth. Now listen, so we redirect and re-energize our efforts to look more closely at our weaknesses. All is done in an attempt to find further layers of dysfunction and failure. I know people, see, I did my fourth and fifth step in 1981. I've never done it again since then. Or 6 or 7 or 8 and 9. I've never formally redone the steps. I know people that redo the steps every year. They're proud about that. Every year they redo the steps. And they go a little deeper. We're going to dig a little deeper. We're going to find what's more is wrong with me. Man, the first round was enough. We discovered you were a kook. That was the first round. And you were a crooked kook on top of it. And now you want to dig a little deeper and you want to find one more thing wrong with you. I only have identified 118 character defects. I think I need to find some more. Maybe you do. Put that one down at the top of the list. I don't need to look anymore. There comes a place where after a while it just becomes redundant. I'm not saying that you shouldn't work the steps and dig in and look, but at some point focusing on weakness only produces more weakness. In your search to look for anything that resembles progress, change, or even movement, many seem to locate momentary failures that take them as an indicator that they must really still be sick. And in a need to consider themselves perpetually dysfunctional. This is being stuck into problem vulnerability, addiction-centered thinking, while ignoring the solution, which is strength-based recovery. These are like the person who buys a plane ticket just to hear the free safety lecture at the beginning of the flight. How many in this world do not know how to operate a seatbelt? That's my question. I don't understand. Those battling out of the cycle of addiction should not settle for a simple destination called abstinence. When there's a sober destiny that God has planned out and has waiting for you. Strength-based sobriety is setting aside the deep, sometimes redundant introspection used in identifying weaknesses and instead beginning the journey into finding our strengths. Not that searching the hearts and minds for the reality of our failed life is not important. However, the long-term function in introspection cannot make us stronger. Unchanged character and anemic faith are the byproduct. What happens? Rather than continuing this self-perpetuating focus on failure, we need to identify our abilities and prioritize our goals and reinforce our strengths. The illusion of success and the illusion of control that I see in a lot of old-timers comes when we believe that we actually did this thing. The elimination of God from the equation creates a new layer of self-centered behavior that produces a higher dimension of the deception of self. And then there comes a need for me to dig a little deeper because I'm still manifesting self-centered behavior. God brought you out of the mess. God fixed you. God gave you all the answers, and you threw them down so you could come up with something more complicated. Turn to the person next to you and say, I had no idea you were that messed up. Turn and tell somebody. A focus on my weakness only serves to make them become more prominent. You cannot rid yourself of fear or anger or lust or greed by focusing on the defective parts of your personality. Identifying them, yes. Deal with the behaviors, yes, again. But to make a lifetime focus on your weaknesses only serves to further establish the challenge. You become trapped in perpetual victimization. You see, when we work the steps, say, I'm going to work them. Say, I'm going to work them. Maybe you already have. See, we work the steps. The steps are more like the scaffolding that's necessary to build the structure. Having completed the structure, the scaffolding comes down. It may be used again and again for cleaning and repairing and painting the structure, but it never becomes part of the structure. Scaffolding was never designed to become synonymous with the structure. Focusing on the defects is somewhat like choosing to move in and set up house on the scaffolding when there's an entire building in which to reside. Some of you have built the scaffolding, and with the scaffolding you've built an entire place to live. And you camp out on the scaffolding every night. And I'm telling you, it was never designed to be that way. I didn't get sober so I could attend AA meetings. I attended AA meetings so I could get sober. I didn't work the steps so that I could find a new occupation, that I could do this for the rest of my life. Oh my God, am I sick? Ooh. Are you kidding? The idea is that we work this process to get well. Say, I'm going to get well. I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to get whole. When you get to step number 11, it's that we seek for a clearer conscious contact with God, praying only for what? For the knowledge of and let me tell you why step 11 has not worked. Because God is not going to reveal the knowledge of His will to a person who's still living in their old behaviors. He won't give you His will until you start operating with your own. Step number 3 is about finding out you have a free will and God expects you to grow up and use it right. Your choices have to change. In order for you to change as a person, your choices will need to change. Is this all right? Am I doing okay? For an impromptu message, I didn't think it was bad. It's the old adage of peeling an onion. How many have heard that? You know, we peel away one layer at a time. We peel it away. Let me ask you, what if you get to the core of this thing and discover you're an onion? You're just going to sit there and emanate bad odor? What is it about you anyhow? I submit that a focus on fear and failure has an essential role in play in identifying and breaking down the denial that's so prevalent in addictions. However, after a lifetime focus on fear and failure, we discover that it only produces after its kind. The redirection towards faith and progress is the only true way to grow past the entry level of recovery that for that matter, from the very beginning, that was the spiritual place that we were supposed to begin. The change of direction repositions us from the law of diminishing return to the law of exponential increase. We assimilate the vulnerability model and move it into a strength-based model. Let me tell you how to do that. Strength-based recovery moves us from nurturing, number one, from nurturing weakness to building strength. Are you done nurturing weakness? I said, are you done nurturing your weaknesses? I have a beautiful lawn, but it's got some weeds that was growing in it. So I bought some weed and feed. I thought, well, I'll get rid of the weeds. I got rid of some of the grass, too. The other part of it was I fed some of the weeds. Man, some of them weeds are, whew, they're strong now. They got it, you know. This moves, number two, is moving from a defeatist mentality to a more than conqueror's mindset. How many want to be more than a conqueror? That means you defeat the enemy and then there's more. Hello, are you listening or not? That means you defeat the enemy and now there's more. What is more than a conqueror? I conquered that other thing and now I'm going to build something good. Number three, strength-based recovery takes us from life's limitations. How many notice them? Limitations in life. From life's limitations to God's limitless resources. Which side do you want to live on anyhow? It takes us from identifying problems to grasping solutions. It takes us from spiritual uncertainty to spiritual confidence. It takes us from hearing life's challenges to hearing God's plan. Can you see the comparison? It takes us out of self-pity and puts us into valuing God's great gifts. It takes us out of the directional quagmire and it gives us purpose and goals. It takes us from life's limitations and it produces change options for us. You can change. I said you can change. I said you can change. Come on, you don't have to remain kooky and nuts and sick and broken and failing and going back into your addiction every minute. The last one I'll give you, it takes us from dictatorial bondage into foundational freedoms. Haven't you been in bondage to that addiction long enough? Haven't you been long enough battling with this thing? Because how many here like it when people tell you what to do? Let me see your hand. Anybody? How many just don't really like anybody telling you what to do? Let me see your hand if you don't like that. That's the majority of you. How many wouldn't lift your hand up no matter what I asked tonight? Yeah. There's always one. We don't want anybody to tell us what to do, but we surrender our life to character defects, and we surrender our life to sins, and we surrender our life to the wrong things. And we somehow wonder why we keep going backwards. The option to move into strength-based recovery is normally greater than our response to it. Most people find vulnerability, sobriety, and they camp out there and they never grow up. As soon as you begin to respond, you need to respond. How many have ever just believed you heard from God? You heard in your heart. Let me see your hand. Wave your hand at me if you've heard from God. If you've never heard from God, let me see your hand. Everybody must have heard from God on some level because nobody raised their hand. I ain't raising my hand for that one. I want to give you 3 things you need to do when you hear from God. Everybody in this room tonight, when I'm talking to you about strength-based recovery, and I'm talking about breaking the cycle of vulnerability, everybody in this room's got one thing that pops to mind. Yeah. Come on, go ahead and nod your head. Everybody's got one thing. You all have one thing, and God will always give you the solution. There is no temptation which is common to man, but with God will make a way of escape. God will always give you the solution in a minute. I said in a minute. There's three things you need to do to respond to God. You need to respond quickly. You need to respond deeply. And you need to respond exclusively. Your response to God's direction is the clear start into that strength-based sobriety. It grows in proportion to what you're doing with it. If you'll start working on your strengths and stop working on your weaknesses, your strengths will grow. You'll become powerful. You'll become potent. You'll find all the stuff that you planned on doing while you were sitting in the bar getting drunk. Oh, it's all been sitting there. You've wanted to do the same things for years and years and years. Never got around to it. I'm running a school of ministry now. The number of people that finally end up surrendering and coming to that school. And most of them at the end, they go, I don't know why I waited so long. What in the world was I thinking? I don't know. You were thinking you needed to work on one more character defect so you could get good enough to come to school. I want some of you here tonight to come to that school. Guy came to that school. If he can get through the school, anybody can get through the school. Strength-based sobriety grows in proportion to what you're doing with it. Strength-based sobriety is outside of my human understanding. Always. His grace is always greater than my understanding. Strength-based sobriety stops if it's not responded to. The call for you to grow up and mature and become a full-grown spiritual adult will stop if you don't respond. God's a gentleman. He's not going to bother you. He's just going to let you be whatever you want to be. But if you've decided you want to be something more than a bag of broken nonsense, hello, are you listening to me or not? How many want to be a bag of broken nonsense? You never thought about it, but it sure fits you well. The option to move into strength-based recovery is accessed when we understand that developed and expanded levels of recovery require healing first, and then diligent effort towards personal development. There comes a place that you can break the cycle. You can get free from all of the nonsense. In May of next year, I'm going to Latvia. I always wanted to go to Europe. Somebody came to one of my meetings one night and talked to me afterwards and said he wanted me to go to Latvia. Part of me is not that well. I don't know where Latvia is. And I said, I think that'd be great, go to Latvia. And he said, let's have lunch. I said, okay. That gave me time enough to get a map out and find Latvia. So I asked him, where's Latvia at? He said, next to Lithuania. I said, that helps a lot right there. He said, just around from Gastonia. I said, oh, we're getting closer now. He said, by Poland. I said, Poland, I've heard of, yeah. I've been on a lot of mission trips. We go on inner healing, and I go and I minister in the prophetic. I do all kinds of things. I teach mainly on prayer when I travel. But one of my dreams, see, if I'd have stayed in the vulnerability, weak model of sobriety, I'd have never got it. But I started building my strengths. And so when I got, first of all, I was platformed in front of the right guy so that I could go to Lithuania. I got a guy right now in Lithuania translating my books into Lithuanian. Because in May, we're going to Lithuania and Gastonia and whatever other places, maybe even into Russia. We're going to go over there, and they have a tour set up for me to teach 12-step recovery somewhere where I've never been, know nobody from there. That's a God deal right there. We want to put your book in our language, and we want you to come and teach our leaders how to bring recovery into Lithuania and Latvia, where we have an outrageous vodka problem. I'm familiar with vodka. You can drink it and it doesn't smell like alcohol. Isn't that the one? Right. What is it that you have in the back of your mind? I've wanted to go to Europe for years. Now I'm going to Europe with a great invitation, and they're putting my books in Lithuanian and Latvian, and the workbook comes out the end of this month. Or soon. Yeah, well, I got the cover finally approved. He's from Kentucky, so we're moving on Kentucky time. That's kind of how it works. We will have that workbook. By the next time I come here, we'll have the workbook in hand. And that workbook is now being put into it'll be in Latvian before you get a chance to see it. Isn't that amazing? That's how God works. Getting ready to go to Peru and minister to people in Peru. We're going to Europe, and we got other invitations all over. But I didn't get that because I sat around and complained that I had character defects. This group of people, some of you need to just work the steps. Some of you need to drop back to don't drink and go to meetings. Some of you need to stop thinking the negative stuff. There's one person here tonight, the Lord showed me during prayer. There's one person here tonight that's highly suicidal. And it's noted by the plan that you have for your suicide. You need not leave here tonight with that thing. The Lord could probably show me who you are. But I wouldn't call you out even if he did. And he did. There comes a place where we have to learn how to get healthy. Oh, the worship, it's all fine. This is good. Worship, loud music and all. That's great. But what's the one thing that God keeps saying that you've not responded to? What's the one thing? What's the one thing that God says that you need to respond quickly, and you need to respond deeply, and you need to respond exclusively to? What's the one thing you need to get rid of? What's the one thing that you need to add? What's the one thing you need to stand up and do? What's the one thing you need to quit doing? What's the one thing that God said to you? Because it will not only be your demise in growing into a spiritual adult, but it will be knocking at your door at some point in your sobriety, calling your name. You got a clean house. This is a simple approach. I stopped drinking. I stopped using drugs. I asked God to help me. I hear what God says, and then I do what he said to do. Geez, it's not that complicated. Now, if you need some of the other, I have a PhD in psychology. I can mix you up as good as the next guy. I was actually invited to go open an office up in Bradenton with a prominent psychiatrist just this couple months ago. He wanted me to come up there. He'd get set up in the office. He'll refer people to me. That's after he sifts them through and gives them all kind of medication. Then he wants me to fix them. I said, I'll tell you what, why don't they come to me first? If I find anybody needs meds, I'll send them over to you. I'll charge $300 an hour, and you can charge something less. So I had an offer. I could charge you $100 for 45 minutes, and he'll refer me people as long as I'm willing to talk to them. And I said, God, what is that? And he said, I don't know. I didn't tell you to do it. I said, but I like the sound of that money. He said, that's why I didn't tell you to do it. He said, David, you would never be at peace. This is the Lord spoke this to me. He said, you would never be at peace, and you'd never feel comfortable going to an AA meeting again and helping those people that are in need when they know you're charging people for something that you cannot produce for them. Because I can't sign on the line and say I'm going to be one of them state guys, but I can't tell you about Jesus. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to charge anybody for that, you know. So I keep doing what I'm doing, and I keep teaching these classes, and it's not as exciting as some things, but it's a far more exciting thing than some other things. I get to see thousands of people get sober. Some of them stay that way. Some of them change. Some of them grow up. I want you to do an exercise right now. I want you to get one person that you trust. You might have to stand up to do. Everybody stand up. That'll give you a reason to wake up. We're going to close with this. Come on. Stand up quick. Come on. I want you to get it face to face with somebody that you trust. Come on. Get a person in front of you. Look them in the eye. All right, you're going to have to stop talking to get the rest of the instruction. Everybody find somebody. If you found somebody, be quiet. Has everybody got a partner? Now here's the exercise. I want you to look at them. Need to be standing face to face. Look at them. I want you to be bold enough to tell them the one thing that God has said to do or not to do. What's the one thing that you have that you need to get rid of or you need to add? What's the one thing God said? Tell them. You go first. I heard that all the way up here. I didn't tell them to tell your whole life story, just the one thing. All right, now everybody stop talking for a minute. 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 Now I want you to pray with one another that God will help you do that. Go ahead. Alan Tobiason. Oh, he's praying for somebody.
Let's give it up for Dr. David Sutton, everybody. Thank you so much. Great message, my friend. You know, about 10 years ago, I started going to the Salvation Army Tuesday night. We'd call it the Sutton Show. If you knew me, you know where I would be on Tuesday nights because I rarely missed an evening there. David was talking about things that happen in our lives when we keep our recovery simple. Sometimes I just have to pinch myself because if he would have told me 15 years ago, I'd be standing up in front of you guys. I'd say you're smoking some good stuff. But I mean, it's really wild what God can do in our lives when we surrender fully to Him. I took that one thing seriously, and it's going to take the power of God working in our lives to do that, and it took a lot of courage to do. One of the things that's really cool was I've never had my name printed in a book before. How many of you have had your name printed in a book before? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's pretty cool. I just want to read to you. Dr. David Sutton has a powerful influence in my life and in the lives of thousands. I am grateful for his friendship and the opportunities he's provided in my life to minister to others. We have him speak frequently, and he knocks it out of the park every time. I am confident that this book will impact your life and strengthen your faith as it has mine. It's got my name on there. That is pretty cool, right? That's going to last a long time. So, David brought some books, but I don't think he brought enough of them. So we're going to keep these in constant supply. They're only $10. And this is the principal approach. It's about the 12 steps of the program and the corresponding principle that goes along with each step. And I'll tell you, I would hang on every word when I first went through this program the first time with him. And every time he speaks, I pick up something new. So he'll be back again, I think, in December. And so we want to wish him well on his travels. And if you want more information or books, they'll be right around the corner. Next week, dinner at 6 o'clock. We'll see you guys then. All right? Have a good night.